You know, high school horror stories, we've all got them. But this Carrie White case, that's something else entirely.
Yeah, and you've really gone above and beyond bringing all this together. News clippings, supposed psychological profiles of her, even a poem.
I don't know where you find this stuff, but I gotta say, I'm impressed.
Well, someone's got to do it.
So let's dive in, shall we? Telekinesis, teen angst, and a whole lot of pig's blood. Where do we even begin?
Well, the source material about Chamberlain, Maine, that's what always gets me. It's described as this idyllic town, picturesque, peaceful,
Yeah.
the calm before the storm.
It's a classic small town horror. Everyone knows everyone's business, secrets simmering just below the surface.
Right, exactly. And then you have Carrie White, this shy, ostracized girl. Different, an outcast.
And then that difference gets, well, amplified by her telekinesis. Imagine the isolation of being a teenager, then add a superpower you don't understand.
It's like she was ostracized twice.
Oh, her.
First, just for being Carrie, and then again for this ability that sets her apart even more.
And the home life, wow, that excerpt from Margaret White, where she calls breasts dirty pillows, that's beyond strict.
It's chilling, and the research papers you dug up, they point to this very specific, very rigid religious extremism. It's less about faith and more about controlling women, especially when it comes to their bodies.
Which adds this whole other layer to Carrie's story, right? I mean, to grow up with that kind of shame around something so natural.
It's bound to have consequences.
Absolutely. So we've got this volatile mix of religious extremism, telekinetic powers. But hold on, you actually have some scientific papers in this stack. Is there any real science behind this whole mind over matter thing?
That's the million-dollar question. One paper draws parallels between Carrie's abilities and documented cases of psychokinesis, objects moving without explanation.
Oh, like poltergeists.
Kind of, except they're talking about potential genetic markers, stuff that might make someone predisposed to this sensitivity.
So there could be other Carries out there that's both fascinating and a little terrifying, right? But back in Chamberlain, we see these little glimpses of Carrie's power long before prom night, like that incident with Tommy Erbter.
Oh, yeah. He's taunting her, being a jerk, and suddenly his bite flips, sending him sprawling.
Karma. Or something more deliberate.
Well, then you have Estelle Horan's account.
Yeah.
Remember her? Sunbathing in her backyard, just a normal day, and then...
Carrie walks over and asks about her. Well, Estelle claims that Carrie specifically said, I wish I had some. Like she instinctively knew something was different about her body.
Almost like her powers were tied to her own development,
Yeah.
It's eerie how these smaller events foreshadow the bigger picture.
And don't forget what happens right after Carrie's encounter with Estelle. A hailstorm.
No.
And not just any hailstorm, it pelts the White House with stones.
Some people chalked it up to God's wrath, a punishment for Carrie's questioning. But others saw it as something else entirely.
It's like saying a prayer and having lightning strike. Coincidence or something more. You said it yourself. This girl's a powder keg. We've got burgeoning powers, a repressive home life, and then...
Well, the locker room incident. That's where things really start to spiral out of control. I mean, high school's rough, right? We've all had those moments of awkwardness or feeling like we don't fit in.
But the locker room incident with Carrie, it's like that primal fear of exposure, humiliation, taken to the extreme.
And it all goes back to that oppressive upbringing. I can't imagine reaching high school and not even knowing about periods.
It's almost unthinkable, right? And there were actual debates afterward, people arguing that Margaret White should be held legally responsible. Neglect, even child abuse, some experts called it.
It's easy to get caught up in the blame game, but you have to wonder, what if Carrie had someone in her corner? A teacher, a guidance counselor, anyone.
Right, someone who could offer different perspective, a bit of understanding. It makes you think about those sliding door moments. Speaking of sliding doors, let's talk about Sue Snell. She goes from tormentor to, well, what exactly is she trying to do? Some sources paint her as this remorseful figure, racked with guilt.
And then there are the others that suggest maybe it's more about reputation management, trying to smooth things over with a grand gesture.
Hence the prom invitation. But Tommy Ross, he seems different. The sensitive poet-athlete drawn to Carrie. Was he for real or just a pawn in Sue's game?
Honestly, I go back and forth on that one. The sources present him as this genuinely good guy, but there's always that nagging doubt,
And what about Chris and Billy? Talk about a study in contrasts. While Sue's wrestling with her conscience, they're out for blood, literally.
And the fact that they go about it so casually, it sends chills down my spine. Especially that line from Billy, pig's blood for a pig. It's like he's already dehumanized her.
They're almost like agents of chaos feeding off each other's darkness. You know it's going to be bad, but...
But you can't look away.
Exactly. So we've got Carrie, this powder keg of emotions, heading to prom with the sensitive poet. And in the wings, Chris and Billy, their cruelty disguised as a prank. So the night's here, big gym, bright lights, everything's there. But underneath it all, this tension, you know, like something's about to break.
The sources describe Carrie just standing there. Yeah, spotlights on her. For a second, it's like she's Cinderella at the ball.
And Tommy, is he playing the part, or is there some genuine connection there?
Hard to say, but that moment when they're crowned king and queen, it's like this fragile hope starts to bloom.
Tragic, really, because you want to root for her, for that fairy tale ending.
But then, yeah, the bucket.
It's not just the blood itself, it's the laughter, right? Like this wave of cruelty crashing down on top of her.
It's like they're mocking the very idea that she could ever be accepted, loved even.
And for Carrie, I mean, you can only push someone so far. Years of ridicule, of loneliness, all culminating in that one awful moment.
She becomes this conduit for all that pent-up rage, that humiliation. And the gym itself, those rigged stranglers, the wiling, it's almost like it was designed to go up in flames.
It's more than just a high school prank gone wrong.
Right.
It's like Chamberlain itself is about to pay the price.
Right. It's like the town, this whole culture of turning a blind eye to bullying, it created the perfect storm.
And when Carrie's powers are finally unleashed, it's terrifying, sure, but there are also these moments that almost feel like...
Justice. Retribution. Like those eyewitness accounts of Carrie, covered in blood, walking calmly amidst the chaos. She's no longer afraid. She's in control.
Which makes what happens with her mother even more tragic. You said it yourself, their final confrontation is brutal.
It's like Margaret, with her twisted version of love, ends up being the instrument of Carrie's ultimate destruction.
And what about Sue Snell? In the end, she's the only one who truly sees Carrie, right? That psychic link they share, it's
powerful, haunting. It adds this whole other layer of complexity to their relationship. Makes you question everything you thought you knew.
So we're left with more questions than answers. Was Carrie a victim? A villain? Or some strange combination of both?
The thing about Carrie White, you can analyze the psychology, the social dynamics, even the science of her powers.
But in the end,
it's a story about us, about the choices we make, the consequences of our actions, and about that dark side of human nature that we all try to ignore, right up until it explodes.
So if there's one thing we can all take away from this deep dive, it's this. Be kind. You never know what someone else is going through, what battles they're fighting, because sometimes all it takes is one act of kindness to change the course of a life. Or, in Carrie's case, the fate of an entire town.